Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series. I am Kate Trams, and today we have Sean Bear speaking on Healing the Healer. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center, or ATTC. We are one of 4 national focus centers serving the ATTC network shown on this slide. The network also includes 10 regional centers and a network coordinating office. To learn more, please visit our website. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEUs for a $15 fee. The CEU request form is available for download in the Files pod in the webinar screen, and we will also be sending this form out in a follow-up email to all who attended. Immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GIPRA evaluation. SAMHSA asks us to evaluate our events in order to provide improved performance assessment and accountability. The survey asks about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 10 minutes to complete. We thank you in advance for helping us to improve our programs. You will be muted for the duration of this webinar, so please use the Q&A pod to share your questions and comments, and we will address questions at appropriate points during the presentation. Sean also wanted to let you know there's some of the his content is a little bit more interactive, so he would love to have people respond and interact throughout the session. So please feel free to submit comments and interact throughout. As I mentioned, we are welcoming our own Sean Bear for this presentation. Sean is a member of the Meskwaki tribe and has worked with Native Americans with substance use issues for many years. He's currently working as our Senior Behavioral Health Consultant here at the National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC, and his passion is to assist people in overcoming their substance use issues and to return to the ways of their ancestors. And this is a vital part of the work we do in supporting behavioral health workers. We're excited to have Sean share this today. He has a big heart for this issue and helping people who are serving others to make sure that they are caring for themselves and their own needs met. And so I'm really excited to have him share this with us today. So I'm going to pass things over to him at this point, and thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, hello all, this is Sean Bear. Nice to be here again today. I hope that you'll all be, just feel free to ask questions as they come. Later on we will be doing some activities, so that's something that I really wanted to be able to help some people out there, some of the things that I had gone through as well. But let me see. Some of this had been designed to be for more of face-to-face training, so some of the activities needed to be changed or adapted a little bit for online. That's one thing I wanted to let everybody know. So then, looking at this, it's possible that this could be a means to help those other providers who may be having some kind of issues or something with their own life or something like that with as they work with clientele. Sometimes it tends to get a little hard sometimes because, for one thing, in school, we learn to deal with stress of helping professions, of being a helping professional, but sometimes I felt that they could have spent more time on the topic.
Your microphone has been turned on.
Hello, did you miss the first part?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you hear the
Sorry about
first
that.
part?
Just ignore that. That was
Okay.
yes, yeah, we were able to hear you. Yeah, just
Okay.
our conference line,
Okay.
we got disconnected. So sorry about that.
Okay, so we were taught to check in on clients to ensure their safety and well-being. Yet as we learn, it can be very different in practice. Okay, so here you'll see that as I had difficulty dealing with issues that weren't even my own, I realized that this was affecting me. So I think did we miss something? Okay. So as I listened to the clients each day, they shared information with me that sometimes made me concerned. I'm sure we all do. Um, so I had worried about them. And a lot of times I took those worries home. But there was a certain time when our center, one of our other counselors had, one of the clients had passed away. So those things really bothered me. So a lot of times in life, it's like I realized that I was thinking about these things at home. And sometimes maybe I'd had interaction with family, and all of a sudden I was kind of getting angry or some kind, react in a way I shouldn't be. It's a lot of times because I found myself thinking about my clients and hoping that they were okay. Well, I remembered about balancing one's personal life with work, that we must not, take our work home with us. So then you kind of ask yourself after a while, in life in general, pretty much, is what kind of information do you tend to remember the most? Or even with clients, is it positive or negative? So when you're thinking about these things, those are the kind of things that you actually take home with you. If it's been a really great day, I mean, if you've had really good interactions with clients or people, you're happy about that. But if things are really bothering you and you don't learn to let them go, you're also going to be taking those things home with you as well. So those are kind of something to think about at times. Um, so as this was going on, um, I realized that it was affecting me more than it probably should. I kind of went back to what I had been taught in schools. Then I remembered what these medicine men had instructed me before. So I utilized some of those same principles. At first, it was very difficult, but over time, it became a little easier each time. Um, I began to reframe my thoughts and focus on what I had done right, such as giving clients the coping skills that they needed, emergency numbers. Um, One thing I really learned to look at and look for in each session with clients was to look for those teachable moments. When people or clients had issues that you could tell that maybe they felt hopeless, to give them a sense of hope. Give them tools to utilize when they have difficulty. And if you think about it, over time in life, that when we think about things and we tend to have a hard time to let them go, maybe sometimes we might pray, sometimes we might try to do something to let it go, but we always seem to come back to that. And part of that was, in a sense, like prayer. Um, because sometimes when we pray, we say, like, did it work? Is it going to work? Is everything going to be okay? But one thing, it's like how I was taught growing up was when you say those prayers, you must learn to trust in those prayers, because that is part of the faith, and even working with medicines or working with healers or things like that. You have to be able to believe in those things, because if you don't, then there might be a little more difficulty in getting that healing and that help. So, what I began to do was to sit before I ever got done with work. Either I punched out or whatever it might be. I realized then that that is the point where I need to kind of focus on as well. So I found this spot in my office, or sometimes even by a window, that would really help me. So sometimes I would look out into the sky, look out into nature, something that was more peaceful for me. But I also learn to think differently. And I thought it was really helpful because when I was a young child, I was in the martial arts, and our teachers were really strict. Every day before we started anything, we all had to meditate, and that was normally, sometimes half an hour in one spot. But to put our mind in a different way, in a different area, to paint a picture around you that even seemed real as you sit there. So I learned to utilize that, and like I'd always imagine myself sitting on this big stone, and as time would go on, this would get even bigger. The whole land would get bigger, and so then as I was growing up, when I had difficulty with other students in school, or people were trying to egg me on, it's like I thought of that immediately, and I was able to not get angry. But when it came to the clients and stuff, I had to learn to try to reframe that a bit. So I focused on what I had done right, and also focusing that everything would be okay and that I needed to let it go. It's not my part. This is part of work, and I'll put this here. And when I go home, I'll focus on family. So sometimes, even when I was about ready to leave, I had to go back to my room again and do that. Over time, what had happened was this time got shorter and shorter, to a point when, as soon as I reached the front door and stepped out, it was my home time or my personal time. And over that time later on, I was able to kind of disconnect those two. So as soon as I stepped out the door, it was gone, and it really helped. It really helped me, and that's something that I wanted to share with some of the people that might be having some of the same difficulty. So I began to look at a lot of things, and this is what I talk kind of call learning from the old, because long ago we knew that all of creation worked in a circular motion. Everything is in harmony. All of nature is in harmony with each other. But sometimes we are not. We're the ones who are kind of the odd kind of ball sometimes in nature. We want things to be how we want it, but if we let things be as they are, things kind of work out. One of the teachings of kind of like of the spider web, though, is that everybody has energy. Everybody's kind of connected. And a lot of times I think what has happened is people have kind of disconnected from more of the nature and become more connected in this computers, TVs, radios, cars, work, or anything like that. Because long ago it was about living. And I think today that, and what I've learned is, it seems that we strive more to kind of make it, instead of being able to kind of be happy with our life and living. So remembering that we have a mind, our body, our spirit, emotions. We have to be able to take care of each one of those. So, looking at that, when we also look at clientele or ourselves, we need to focus on the whole person, our whole self, learning to look at each area that needs attention. Within looking at the medicine wheel, that's a big part of my teachings I've learned is about the body, making sure you eat healthy, making sure you get exercise, the mind, also, and making sure that you don't focus on too much negativity, to focus on good things. And your emotions, you can't just sit with negative emotions. You have to learn to bring laughter and goodness and happiness in your life. Also, a spirit is to be able to pray, to be able to attend ceremonies if you can, or take time out for yourself somehow. Looking at those, it's like emotions, though, I believe, are often left out. It's not something that we normally are taught by our parents or at school. A lot of times they tell us, oh, it'll go away or it'll get better or just hang in there. But they don't really teach us how to always deal with anger, how to deal with shame or guilt or any kind of thing like that. And so we kind of struggle in life through that. So, but if we are able to overcome those feelings that are difficult for us, it makes things so much easier. And I'm hoping that's something that will change later on. So, looking at healings, many medicine people during healings, they might be healing people, removing things from people, whether it be sickness or negative energies or whatever, washing. And a lot of times it's like kind of cleaning the person, helping them, sometimes even being around them. But just like we take care of our cars or take care of our homes or take care of our sacred objects, we also need to take care of ourselves as well. Some of them times they said, well, you need to fast in order for you to get that help. And some of it may come from knowledge. Maybe you acquire this knowledge that long ago something had happened to you, but you forgot about that, and it has affected you all that time. So looking at your thoughts, your feelings and emotions, part of what I was taught was that if you kind of like touch your forehead, that's where your thoughts come from. And you kind of touch your chest, in the middle of your chest, and that's where your feet are underneath your belly button, maybe about an inch or two underneath there. That's really, he said, where we hold our emotions. So looking at those in balance as well, you learn that, okay, you have thoughts, feelings, and emotions. But if you have any difficulty in those, because energies also are affected by those as well. Our thoughts can be a negative thought or a positive thought. Our feelings can be positive or negative. Our emotions can be positive or negative. But whether they're positive or negative depend upon, the energy about those depend upon those, because a more of a negative thought, feeling, or emotion are going to have a heavier energy to it, a lower vibration, I guess you might say. A higher good thoughts, feelings, and emotions are going to be, helping. They're going to help us feel good. But while long ago, when I had been, after I got out of the military, I had a difficulty with that and coping with the world in a sense. And that's why I really began to go see medicine men. But while I was there, I had opportunities to work with these medicine men and travel with them sometimes, and help them Sometimes I might drum for them or something. Um, I had noticed that many of the people they'd seen had, he'd be helping them in their abdomen area. And I'd asked him, I said, why do you always work on this area? He goes, well, some of these people are not always telling us. And normally they're women. So some of them, he said he knew had some kind of sexual thing happen to them when they were younger, or some kind of trauma had happened to them. Um, so then those energies there are collecting those negative energies. So he said, if I do not remove those, eventually they will get sick there. As you see, some of the people that we are kind of helping, or he's helping, is that they already have developed some of these illnesses. So, in the way he describes it, it's like a darker energy there is built up because of what had happened, but they never really learned to let it go. So, or to deal with it correctly. So, this energies would collect over time and develop into a sickness of some kind. So then that's when I learned it's like our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions are the same way, because if we don't take care of them correctly, they may affect us later in life. So, let me see. And some of this also is like, in order for us to be helped, we also have to be able to let it go. Because if we hold on to certain hardships or moments in our life, we're not totally letting it go. We're not, he might remove those things, but eventually they're going to build up again if something's not done about it. So some of that takes, some of that is from us. So in that is like, healing is also can be more like a mutual thing between the healer and the person that's being helped. So because we are all energies, I mean, everything in creation has energy. Our energies kind of affect one another without us even knowing it. So then sometimes this medicine man, things would have to pass through him in order to get that help. But also remembering that because of the interaction that's going on, those energies of each person there tend to connect between the healer and the person being healed. So then I remember also with teaching that you also have to believe and have faith in those healings. I remember the older ones always saying that you must believe in those. Okay, so during that, he had also said that, or maybe there was even times that medicine men I've gone to before that they had to take time out. So then I'd learn more about how they would take time out, and the reason why is because through all these healings with people that at times they needed to back away from the healing, because through the healings and through the interactions, their energies had connected to one another. So they had to be kind of cut. Any kind of residue that may have had to pass through the medicine men had to be removed. They also had to get some kind of healing from the spirits, or even sometimes from others, or eventually they might get sick themselves if they don't take that time out when they're supposed to. So then, part of this is when they did that, they weren't allowed to heal other people anymore. Sometimes they weren't even allowed to do anything with any kind of ceremonies or go to anybody's at all. They actually had to just pray, maybe just rest, just relax, and at times to get back in nature and just to remember to live again and kind of have fun or whatever it is, just like it being a human again. So, just as others need help, they too may undergo healings or may need to take care of themselves just as anybody else would. Okay, so through that, um, we must remember that long ago people were not taught to do things that would harm others, either even through words or thoughts or feelings or emotions or actions. Remembering that all creation, people, trees, whatever it might be, everything has a spirit, and that there's also energy within all of creation, even within ourselves, even in our own thoughts, our feelings, emotions, our actions, or things like that. You might see that. Let's see. How. Let's see. Okay, so then remembering that we all have energy, and that was one of the first things that I was taught. Um, okay, so through that, we learn that all of creation has energy. We realized that everything we had done in our past, thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, even words we spoke to others, had an energy, and it kind of went out. Especially if you're angry at somebody else, you might put that upon others. As we walk around, we realize that everywhere we go, we're in a bubble of that energy. And sometimes we come across other people, they might bump into each other. Or sometimes we go into environments that are more negative and they kind of attach onto our energies as well. So remembering that is one reason we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, and smudging, or prayer, and different things like that. So then he also told me when I went to see him because he had talked about, he had thought that I had PTSD, and his concern was because he said PTSD and other kind of illnesses sometimes are triggered by fears. And he said if people don't take care of those fears or to overcome them, they may affect your life later on. It made sense um, by the teachings he later said with thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and how they affect the different body parts. So some of those, he said, some of those who may become healers at times may be seen in hospitals before they ever realize what's going on, so that they might end up with a mental health disorder, or community members may see them as odd. But with the right teachings and with a teacher or something like that, they could learn to utilize those gifts. And he had talked about balance, and that the stronger somebody is, or their gifts are when they awaken, the more problem they'll have in those areas. So sometimes it's something that we need to kind of think about or remember. So especially like with diagnosing and stuff, and that's something that I really think that is something that needs to be taken care of sometimes, because as a lot of the assessments don't always kind of match culturally with natives. So I'm very kind of supportive of other people and addressing some of those issues to like medicine men and stuff like that, so that they can also assess that to make sure that it's not something cultural. So as you look at this, I'd added this on there, and I really thought it was really kind of neat because long ago they did some studies in some cities, and they realized that if they had a certain amount of people who were praying or meditating on these good things, that what it would help a whole population. So if you think about the area you're in, it's like prayer and meditating on these good things may be able to affect some of the areas around you. So you'll see that it said it took 100 people for every 10,000. So people who are doing those, and I think there was some cities that done that. There was like priests and different things like that who were meditating together, and they noticed that crime dropped. There wasn't as many things going on like that. But as soon as they stopped, it began to go up again. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought that was something that might pertain to this. And you can see that it's more than just physical things that we see. So looking at this, what I began to realize is that there's a similarity between what medicine men go through and the counseling professions or therapy. However, we are, when we're in helping profession, we're also kind of making these connections with clients as well. So I asked a medicine man about that, and he goes, well, yes. He goes, emotions play a part with that, but also being near somebody and trying to help them. I thought that was very interesting. So I began to think about ways that I had utilized from a spiritual standpoint, or from the ways I was taught with different teachings, how to help others who may be going through some of those same things. So I really wanted to be able to help others who may have gone through some of the same things I had through that time. So remembering we must be able to stay healthy in our own selves if we're going to be able to help our clientele. And if we're able to kind of honor us and everybody else, that, but also learn to let go of things that don't really need to be holding on to. Okay, so then, so through some of these teachings and things I was taught, or different things, if we're looking at some of these old teachings, we're able to relate that in other parts of our lives. So it's something that we can utilize every day, and not just at certain times. So a lot of times what they've come to say is that what we go through sometimes, and a lot of that came from the nursing, is when they started to call it compassion fatigue. Because working with people who had gone through trauma, they began to it began to affect them as well. So then it became like secondary trauma. When we looked at those hurts, sometimes we might have felt it. Sometimes, because what we're taught is empathy, not sympathy. But if you look at empathy or being an empath, then you realize that those things can affect us. So then what we realize is, looking from the other part, with the healing and the spiritual part, we all walk around in our own bubbles. But in the interactions we make with our client, especially very deep interactions where there's hurt and pain, those bubbles kind of become one bubble. And we're kind of in their bubble and them in ours, so that the energies kind of mix. So then what happens is, when we come apart, sometimes what they've said is there's a thin line in between there that we also need to break. So sometimes in that, it's like remembering to break those, but remembering to kind of disconnect as well. Okay, so this is a part, and we know that depression more times is about the past, anxiety is more about the future. But I was going to ask you some questions here. Is all of you kind of think about when you were a young child, when you were very, very little, 5, 7 years old or something like that, under 7 if you can. Is like, what did you want to be when you got older? What did you think life was about? And as we got older, did those things change? Because it kind of seems like over time we tend to see things a little bit different. When we were a child, we had all these great goals. Oh, I want to do this. I want to be this. And somehow or another, something happened to us, or maybe something changed within us, and we did something else. Maybe it's, if everything had happened the way that we had wanted when we were a child, we might feel happier. So that's something that I've learned to work with clients, is sometimes they had goals that were never achieved. Or sometimes, looking at myself, I had goals that were never achieved. So we kind of look back at those and it's like, darn, I sure wish it would have happened. I would be so much better off today. But then looking about that too is, what is life about? I think that the way I've been taught has been helpful to me, because I learned that life isn't always how we want it to be, but it's about how it was supposed to be, in a sense. Sometimes if we go on a different tangent or a different kind of idea, that it can lead us a different way. But one thing that is kind of the same is that either hardship or anything that we go through, it's something to learn from. So, and the way I was taught is that when we come to this world, that we're here to learn, but not learn so much about science or computers or whatever it is, but to learn about life and interactions and with others. But also, how do we deal with our own anger or shame or guilt or any kind of thing we went through? because those are the kind of things that are going to affect us in life and sometimes well into later on down the life as we're older. And sometimes those are things that we need to kind of change within ourselves. So looking at your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, how are those going to affect us in our lives? Okay, so here, there was kind of exercise here, and I wanted everybody, and we'll try to give you 1 minute to do this. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less, but I would like you to all, sit comfortably, close your eyes, don't speak, just relax. Try to have no internal dialogue whatsoever. Okay, go ahead. Okay, you can kind of move around or open your eyes. But what I'd like to hear now is what were your experiences? Were you able to shut off the whole entire internal dialogue? Were you able to not think about noises that were going on around you or things that were happening or maybe your stomach growled or something and you thought about that or something? Maybe you're thinking about if anybody's seen you or something. I mean, what were your experiences? Can anybody share? Anybody? Not one person?
Oh, sorry. I think a couple people are trying to use the raise hand.
Okay.
And yeah, unfortunately, that we don't have the functionality. That's it'll work better if you type your comments and responses into the Q&A pod, and then um, we'll share those. If you can type them in there. Thank you.
Okay, if you could type your comments in, that would be very helpful. And then the next question, I guess, of if they come in, we can go to those. But what does peace mean to you? This was kind of meant to be interactive, so if we could have some interaction, it'd really be great. Okay, so hopefully we'll get some more. Maybe they're not done yet. If they do, we can address those. To me,
Oh, sorry, I was just.
as I began to. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to interrupt Sean and make sure people know where. If you have the presentation in full screen mode, you'll need to click that arrow button again, and then to type into the Q&A pod. The field is at the very bottom of that box. So yeah, we would love to have some comments and interaction on that part. So please let us know what your experiences were.
Okay, in doing some of these things, what I realize, especially like from getting help from these medicine men, um, I began to realize that to me, peace meant a quiet mind, not the internal dialogue going on. And I realized that as we sit or try to meditate or think about good things, sometimes we have these things that keep coming back to us. And it's kind of that way in life, is because those things that are might be bothering us, they keep tend to come. And it's a lot like if you're angry and you say, why can't I let this go? And sometimes the way we do those things is a little bit different, but if we learn to think about things a little bit differently, those things kind of slide off anyway. So I began to fully believe that to find peace within chaos would be a great achievement. So it became one of my personal goals, was to be able to find that within myself, because I'd realized that in grad school when they were talking about what is it, different theories, is we are our thoughts, or some would say we are the sum of all of our experiences. I began to think a little bit differently about that, and that's a paper I was writing, is because I didn't really believe in either one. What I believed was that we're the sum of our thoughts of all those experiences. Because over time, when we're a child, maybe we thought a certain thing, but later on we learned that it wasn't just how we thought it was. So those things bothered us. And over time, we've kind of adapted and changed those things. So we've learned to kind of walk through life with what we've learned in our past. But they always talked about how people would go through an experience and they would come out totally different. But I realized that they could have two people go through the exact same thing together, whether there was a great occurrence in the city or world or somewhere around them, and they were together all that time. Maybe they were best friends and they went through the same exact thing. One would emerge from there later in life and he excelled in life. The other one may have gone through life and he struggled so hard because of this. And I began to look at that a little bit differently, because through the teachings, through what I've learned, is like I realized that it had more to do with what's going on inside. So and what they believed about those experiences. Some may thought it was so distraught it just kind of defeated them. Some was like, oh, this is something I can utilize as a strength. It's like how some people would say, you can't do that. And somebody cowers and said, okay. How some people would say, you can't do that. And someone said, oh yeah, I'll prove you wrong. So I believe that sometimes it can help us or it can hurt us, but it had to do with our thoughts and what we believed about those experiences. Okay, it looks like we have some.
Oh, Sean.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, and I have to apologize. I'm sorry, everyone. I didn't realize that the Q&A pod was hidden from you all, so that was totally my fault. I couldn't tell that it was not viewable. So the Q&A pod is there. I'm so sorry for the confusion. So yeah, we've had a few responses. Teresa says, I find peace with nature, water, trees, sun, moon. Lee says, I just figured out, oh, sorry. Peace to me is when I'm in acceptance of my powerlessness over everything in my life. Teresa says, when I was younger, I became spiritually connected to nature. Cynthia says, I thought I don't have a turn-off valve and I need to learn how to just stop and turn it off so I don't hear all the sounds in my mind. Peace is being able to breathe without feeling like I'm forever catching my breath because I have to go, go, go. Always on the go. And Karen says, peace to me is watching the sun rise and set. I also find peace in music.
Okay, very great, very good. Okay. Looks like we have from Deborah.
Yes, Deborah says, I think peace is a quiet mind, but so hard to shut out life, world, distraction. I believe it's time to slow the world down.
I agree. Yeah, it brings a lot of things in there. So then, usually what I try to talk to people about with this is sometimes those take practice. Just like when I sat with those clients or afterwards and trying to let it all go, is to find that, in a sense, your happy place in a way, but within your mind, and kind of picturing that. Because what I tended to do was to go back to the way that I was taught before, and I sat in my mind, I sat down, I tried to get as comfortable as I could, and I'd sit in such a way that when I closed my eyes, I would imagine that I was sitting on either Mother Earth, but I really like to sit on a stone. So I began to sit on this stone, well, in there, and sometimes I'd even actually go find a stone to actually sit on, so that within myself, when I closed my eyes, I could actually feel it. And sometimes I'd go further, like, is this stone cold? What does it stone feel like? And eventually then I began to picture the grass around me, or whatever's around, but I always pictured grass. And maybe a tree here or there, and then woods in front of me, but I kind of put this stream in front. So as I'm sitting there, I could see the stream. And later on, I was like, well, this can't be like a picture. It has to be more like alive. So you kind of picture the grass moving with the wind, clouds ahead, birds, whatever it might be. But you're imagining, in a sense, your perfect, peaceful place for you. And you kind of sit with that, and just whatever this brings you peace, you kind of picture that with you. And that's part of the way I was able to meditate. Other ways was very difficult for me. So, but once we find that way, we're able to kind of go there sometimes. And one thing I try to do is to do that when I was having difficult times, is to find a window, is to sit in front of that window for a little bit and to try to picture all that, even with the sunlight, because the sunlight hitting my eyelids, it kind of made it even feel more real. To feel whether it's warm or cold or whatever it might be, anything that would be helpful with that. Because we kind of learn that you probably all gone through that before. Is like if whatever you were thinking about when you went to sleep, you wake up thinking about it, just like there was no time that passed. Okay, looks like we have some more comments.
Yes, Ilona shared, peace doesn't mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. Juanita shared, peace is to have a sound mind with no interruptions and to feel every breath I take and just enjoy the quietness and let my mind wander with the things I enjoy. And Sharon says, reminds me of my grandmother's teaching, keep your health.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so then, like I was saying about kind of finding that peace within yourself, even among things that are going around you, whether it be before or after. But if you kind of think about when you go to bed, if you're angry, you wake up thinking about the same thing. So what I've tended to try to do was each night before I go to bed too, was to try to let that all go. Not to let it bother me. So that when I wake up, it's a new day. Because if you're still carrying problems from one day to the other, it tended to kind of be the same. So I would go to bed kind of thinking about all these good things, and it also helped me go to sleep better. But also when I woke up feeling more refreshed. So in order to help myself and able to keep that, I would wake up, sit there for a little bit, and think about the same thing again in that peace. And then right away I'd let it go. And then at times during the day when I might be having difficulty, I'd kind of close my eyes and kind of do that again. So over time, it became more of a habit, I guess, or something that would help me all the time in any kind of situation. So I thought that would be a benefit to pass on to you people, that in case you might need that help as well. Okay, so Deborah, let me see. Okay, was it Elona? Shared a beautiful idea. Thank you. Jane, peace to me is letting go of all the things, situations, and people around me, becoming a being and fully present with appreciation of all the blessings we receive from our grandmother Earth, Creator, and holy deities, plus applying the practice of listening with my heart. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so it's kind of like something we need to do many times in order to help ourselves more often. Teresa, okay, so thank you. Your your presentation is very helpful. Okay. Thank you all for the feedback. Um, yeah, so we go a little bit more from teachings is we learn that anger, fear, shame, guilt, jealousy, greed, envy, etc., were meant to be fought and overcome. We often may have worried about things that didn't even matter really. And that's something that I began to look at more. And when you talk about and maybe talk or discuss with people, it's like, well, how do you know whether you need to think about this or not? Or whether it is something I need to deal with or it's none of my really my issue here. And what I began to think about was to look at it more from a physical point that you could show somebody. And if you have a water bottle or any kind of thing that's round and you sit it on a table, and or what I used to do was to get a full glass of water or something and put it right at the edge of a table. And I learned that everybody would be worried about whether that glass is going to fall off or not. And I began to use those things in my life a little more in different areas because if it's bothering me, um, I ask myself, can I do something about this? Sometimes what I do is move the glass inside more of the table so it wouldn't fall off. Or maybe I was worried something was a roll off. It's like, can I actually do something about it? If I can't do anything about it at all, chances are it's nothing for me to really worry about. It's only things that you can actually do something about. And with our clients, maybe it's helping them to discover other things that they could use in their life. You know, that's why I really like to give them, you know, coping skills, coping mechanisms in order to help them in their own life somehow. Um, so you kind of ask yourself, can I do something about this or not? Okay, so part of letting go, this is kind of neat because this had to do with fear. And the way I was taught was you kind of confront your fear, but you don't do this physically. You only imagine it. And what I did is, you know, I'm not really afraid of mice, but they sure can be kind of creepy sometimes. Um, so I sat there in a chair imagining this mouse. And at first it ran, you know, and one thing about this, you cannot think about it. You can only watch. You must not put any kind of ideas or anything in your own observation of this. It's not something that you just let happen without emotion, without thought, without kind of thinking what might happen or anything. You just watch like it's a movie. And what I realized is this mouse ran right up my leg. And at first I jumped. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It's like, "Well, this is just in my mind, you know." So I was like, "Wow, how'd that happen like that?" But eventually I kind of sat and said, "Okay, this is not real. I'm totally safe." So I did it again, and eventually this mouse ran up my leg, up across my shoulder, down on my hand, and back around again. It jumped off and it just sat in front of me, and it made a weird kind of thing, and I started laughing. So, and that's the kind of thing we want to get to. It's like with fear or things like that. It's something that we need to kind of observe till it becomes funny. Especially, and those are things that I'm not saying that all fear is like that because some is real. But if we're trying to overcome something that really can't harm us like as much as we think we might, It's like a mouse. I mean, we're way bigger than a mouse. And it's like an elephant. It's like they always show an elephant afraid of a mouse, but this elephant or even us could squash the mouse really easy. And I remember seeing people jump on chairs, because they're afraid of mice or whatever. But I was like, wow. I was like, why didn't you just hit it or something? But I realized it's about fear. And I went back to some of the teachings and stuff. I was like, all fear is it's not good for you. So I learned and try to realize is to try to confront and defeat all fear in my life, especially those where it's not real. Some of those things we kind of bring into our own mind or things that have happened in the past. But so I began to watch those things like within my mind, just like meditating, but let it happen until it became funny. And when it became funny and I laughed, those fears kind of subsided. They kind of left. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought this might be something that you might be able to utilize sometimes. So if you want, you can try that another time if you'd like, but you just kind of sit, close your eyes, envision your fear before you, watch it, observe it until it overcomes or becomes funny. It's like sometimes I've learned to also laugh. It's even when you don't feel like laughing. I mean, if you've ever stood in a room, and I think it'd be kind of neat to watch. I've never actually seen anybody do it, but what I've done is to go somewhere, of course, where nobody's over there, and I start laughing. It's not a real laugh, but I'm laughing, ha 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 ha, and eventually the laugh becomes real. Because you might think about, oh wow, if somebody see me, this would look so ridiculous. So then at that time, it's like you actually start laughing. And it helps to reduce that stress. It helps to do those things. It's something that you might want to try later on. I thought it was very helpful for me. Letting go, I think in the Aramaic language, like about forgiveness. Forgiveness really means to drop it, to let it go. So energetically, if we hold on to something or won't let it go, it's going to be difficult to release. And that's something about healing, that we also need to be able to let those things go. Sometimes we might want to stop doing something, but if we keep picking that back up, we're picking up the same kind of problem again. So we need to remember that our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, and actions have energies. And sometimes from these energies, people might need to fast from. Just don't do that no more. Stay away from that. Fight hard not to do that. Maybe if you have a habit of, maybe they always talk about OCD. Maybe you got to rinse your glass so many times. Well, just don't do it. Focus on not doing it. And you'll realize that things get okay. Nothing really bad happened. So. Okay. Okay, Deborah Hobart. I've tried something similar in releasing frustration with systemic problems like bureaucracy. Oh yeah, that's very true. I mean, sometimes we tend to hold on to things that don't always, we might have no control over. So. Okay, so looking back, it's like spiritual lives were learned and lived. In the past, I've always kind of said it's like we lived a spiritual life. And that, similar to religion, it was long ago people lived those lives. Everything was based upon those. And kind of the way the kind of world is today, it's like we've kind of learned to set aside time for that now. It's like, oh, I need to go here for this ceremony. I need to do this at this time. But it's like before we lived our lives around that, and today we've um, kind of set that aside and we fit it into our lives today, especially when we're busy. But if we're able to kind of learn to do these things more often and to set them within our life more, I think it would be very helpful. Um, okay. Okay, so we know that stress is normal. It's part of what's going to happen in our lives. You'll see that even animals kind of go by that. If a population becomes too big, some become sick. It's because energies affect each other. We all have it, and that a stress can take a toll on you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So those are things that we need to help with those and try to get over sometimes. So um, when I returned from the military, that's something that Medicine Man told me to do is to meditate. And at first I didn't know how, but I had to find a way that would work for me. Um, so it's something each one of us need to kind of look at, and hopefully that we can find the way that works for us. Okay, so in managing stress, sometimes you need to get away from your regular routine of work. Do one that works for you. Have fun, relax, get exercise, find somebody to speak to. End of the day activities, change your clothes, your shoes, your hat. Go from your working life to your home life. Don't sit in the same kind of clothes all the time. Do something different. Take a shower. Visualize you're washing all those worries and negative energies off your body. Visualize the water flowing through you, though, not just off of you, but through you and cleansing you. Each maybe take a shower and do that. Sometimes you might feel lighter when you come out. So those are some things, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Um, and remember that we also have to take care of ourselves if we're going to be able to help our clients. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thanks so much for the participation from everyone and for sticking with us since we ran a little long. And as we mentioned before, we do record these webinars, so we will send out a follow-up to everyone who registered, so you can view this again. We'll send out handouts of the presentation and the CEU form if you wanted to request CEUs. And also, as we close out, we will be directing you to our evaluation. So we would appreciate it if you would fill out that survey. If you don't get directed to it, the link for that will also be in the follow-up email, which should come out to you tomorrow. So thanks so much again. Thank you, Sean. And with that, we will go ahead and close out. I hope you all have a great week.